So the Federal Reserve's decision to maintain bond buying surprised a lot of investors in the markets. What exactly is holding the Fed back? Randy Kroszner is a former Federal Reserve governor, professor of economics at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. He joins us from the Windy City. Randy, good to see you again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Doesn't sound like you think a taper is necessarily coming this year at all.
It's going to be dependent on the data. I mean, the chairman has always said that, and the labor market has been less strong since he started talking about it in May, June. The previous months, it looked like the labor market was on a sustained recovery path. Stepped down a little bit over the last few months. We've got a lot of uncertainty on the fiscal issues, as you were just describing, and the big backup in interest rates has potentially led to a slowdown in the housing market. You have to remember, the Fed has been focusing for the last 4 years trying to make sure the housing recovery is sturdy. It doesn't want to destroy that with just a little bit of taper talk.
How does he get out of this box, Randy, where he says he's committed to communicating openly with the markets, which ostensibly gives the markets some intelligence, right? Rates do go up, and then he's unable to taper because, in fact, those higher rates are affecting the economy. How do you bust that cycle?
Well, I think this is as I've mentioned here before, is I call these open mouth operations, this forward guidance, sort of talking about what you will do with open market operations. And I think wisely what they did is start talking about this in May, June, when the economy seemed stronger. But it gave them 2 or 3 months of gathering data to see what was the impact on the markets, what would be the impact on the economy. That data came back not so positive. And so I think that's why they've sort of stepped back. So I think it's actually useful to gather the data before just taking the plunge like in 1994 with no warning.
You know, Randy, for those in the market, this is actually, the last 24 hours have been really astounding. This is how Paul Donovan, global economist at UBS in London, put it. He apologized to his clients for in the past having given the impression that UBS thought that the Fed was a credible and enlightened central bank. He said yesterday destroyed any pretense of transparency, and it all but guaranteed that when policy does change, there will be a negative market reaction. That is not what you want to hear from serious banks like UBS, Randy.
No, for sure not. And I would disagree a little bit with that. I think about the alternative. As I mentioned, back 1994, when central banks didn't talk about what they were going to do, they just did it. And that was devastating to the markets. So sure, there's been some volatility. Sure, people were expecting some sort of step down now. But the 10-year rate is significantly higher than where it was when the first discussion started. It's still 60, 70 basis points higher. So there has been a bit of tightening that has gone on in the market, maybe not as much as some had expected, and I think a little bit more than the Fed had expected, and that's why they're taking a pause.
Well, to the extent, Randy, that the Fed is trying to assert its will on the long end of the curve, are they going to be able to beat the market? Should the market have a different perspective, perhaps, on all those different variables out there?
And this is exactly why they're trying to calibrate their message so that they get the market reaction that they want. In the old days, it was really simple because you just had short interest rates and you could raise the Fed funds rate 25 basis points or lower 25 basis points, and the Fed could pretty much nail that. This is new territory of using these open mouth operations to try to change expectations and work the long end of the curve. As I said, it's still a learning process between the Fed and the markets.
Hey, Randy, just a quick question. Who's the best candidate to lead the Federal Reserve?
Fortunately, the president has a very deep bench, and I think the front runner now seems to be Janet Yellen. She would be excellent. I think Don Cohn would also be an excellent candidate. These are people with PhDs in economics. They have been battle tested in difficult situations. They know the Fed well, and I think that would be very valuable for leading the Fed in this still troubled time.
Randy, I noticed that you, on your time at the Fed, you chaired the Committee on Supervision and Regulation of Banking Institutions. Just love you to weigh in for a moment here on the fines today that J.P. Morgan are being levied against J.P. Morgan that it's paying, a bulk of it to the Federal Reserve. Can you explain to our viewers why it makes sense for a bank that suffered a $6 billion loss to then have to follow it up with huge payments, even though taxpayers obviously did not have to step in here?
Well, I don't know the specifics. You know, that was a while ago that I was on the Supervision Regulation Committee, so I don't know I don't know the inside information that the central bank has and the other regulators have about what they did. Obviously, if they had done something wrong and were inconsistent with proper compliance and inconsistent with the rules of safe and sound banking, then they need to be subject to sanctions. I don't know the specifics here, though, so I can't comment, whether it was the right number or not.
Randy, I got one more question. Just fly on the wall, kind of give us some insight. When the chairman makes a decision that some believe is based on his forecast of congressional discord, right? A would-be shutdown, difficulty in passing legislation. How much intelligence, political intelligence, goes into the decision? How much does the committee know about the vote counting, where the political battle stands between the left and the right?
So that's always much more of an art rather than a science, so we don't have sort of very good prediction models on this. But clearly the chairman and the Fed is acutely aware of what's going on with those kinds of battles. As you know, when the chairman testifies before Congress, a lot of the questions posed to him are about fiscal policy rather than about monetary policy. So there's a back and forth there. I don't think it comes down to just individual vote counting. I think it's more just the uncertainty that's around it. I think it's as we're getting closer, it's becoming clear that it's not going to be a simple resolution. And certainly the Fed doesn't want something that is going to suddenly crater the economy, and that the Fed has to come in and clean it up later.
Yeah, no, that would be messy too. Randy, always good to talk to you about it. Thanks for your time today.